It's wonderful to be back to talk about Operation Sindoor, to talk about conventional wars under the nuclear umbrella. Before we begin this conversation, and we have Professor Walter Ladwig, the third Associate Professor at King's College in London. Also with me is General Rajesh Pant, who's former National Cyber Security Coordinator at the Prime Minister's Office. Welcome on this special broadcast, sir, at the India Today Conclave. I want you to listen in to the environment. One, what Pakistan's Army Chief, then Army Chief, now Field Marshal Asim Munir said about the two-nation theory, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi's response post-Operation Sindoor. Listen in.
Our forefathers, they thought that we are different from the Hindus in every possible aspect of life. Our religion is different. Our customs are different. Our traditions are different. Our thoughts are different. Our ambitions are different. That was the foundation of the two-nation theory that was laid there. That we are two nations. We are not one nation.
पाकिस्तान एक बात भूल गया, अब मां भारती का सेवक मोदी यहां सीना तान कर खड़ा है। मोदी का दिमाग ठंडा है, ठंडा रहता है, लेकिन मोदी का लहू गर्म होता है। और अब तो मोदी की नसों में लहू नहीं, गरम सिंदूर बह रहा है।
Was India able to send across a message when Pakistani terrorists came? They singled out Hindus and 26 Indians were killed. In your appreciation, when India hit back, targeting 11 Pakistani Air Force bases, 6 radar stations and 9 terror camps, including the Lashkar headquarters in Muridke and the Jaish headquarters in Bahawalpur, was Pakistan's nuclear bogey called out?
I think what this really demonstrated is that there is indeed space under the nuclear umbrella for limited conventional conflict. And what we really have to appreciate, and I hope the audience appreciates, is how utterly unprecedented this is, right? In the history of nuclear weapons, we do not have any examples of nuclear-armed states carrying out these kinds of attacks against others. So there's been supposition and theory that there was space for limited war without escalation. This is the first real case that we have of it. And the fact of the matter is, the paradox of nuclear weapons is that they don't deter conflict at every level, and they actually encourage it. So they might prevent another country from using their nuclear weapons against you. In most historical cases, but not all, they prevent large-scale wars from taking place, but they actually encourage crises and instability of the types we see in South Asia.
Was India able to deter Pakistan with Operation Sindoor? And, as Professor Ladwig said, this is unprecedented in the history of the world. Two nuclear weapon states going head-to-head, and a third nuclear weapon state helping the second. So India versus China helping Pakistan. 3 nuclear weapon states, and it didn't escalate beyond, those 88 hours.
Gaurav, that's a very important issue you've raised. And if you also recall what the Prime Minister said in his speech that you showed, he said now there is a new normal where terrorist attacks will be retaliated with military action. So India today, and history bears it, that we are following a process which is called as cumulative deterrence, right? So 2016 you did Uri, we went and did a surgical strike close to the LC. 2019 you did Pahalgam, we went inside and hit you in Balakot. 2025 you did Pahalgam, the earlier was Pulwama. So, and then what you said, those 9 airfields, and the damage is still being assessed as to what has happened. So every time the costs are being raised, and the message is very clear. You do anything, the next time it will be much harsher than what has happened. This is the concept of cumulative deterrence, which now India is following as compared to what we did earlier in terms of strategic constraint. So as Walter was saying, you see 47, 65, 71, we had 3 conventional wars. Then we had the nuclear blasts, 74, 98. We did Pokhran 1 and 2, they did Chagai 1 and 2. And then we had a limited conflict in 99. So Kargil, I will not dilute it. It was a very serious affair. We lost 527 soldiers. But from then till 2025, there has not been a major conventional war between India and Pakistan. So the message is clear that there is a nuclear overhang, as you're saying. But while conventional wars have stopped, conflict has not stopped. And it has opened a whole new form of warfare, which is called as hybrid warfare, and we can discuss that.
Oh, absolutely. When you look at the situation right now between India and Pakistan, Government of India says Operation Sindoor is still on. So does this indicate it's a perpetual state of war, not escalating to a nuclear threshold? So has Pakistan's nuclear bogey been completely called out, or is there apprehension that Pakistan could try and lower the threshold next time?
I'd be careful about saying something so definitive as completely called out. I do think that this is going to be a process of action and reaction. So the Pakistani side will learn from what didn't work for them. They will take measures to try to defeat or complicate if India were to kind of carry out Sindoor Part 2. So on the one hand, it would be improving their air defenses, anti-drone systems, better dispersing and concealing terrorist camps and infrastructure, but likely continuing, and this already was happening, continuing efforts to create smaller yield nuclear weapons, to create battlefield nuclear weapons, to find ways to make that threat more credible. There currently, as Sindoor revealed, is space for India to carry these operations out, to strike Pakistani targets without having a major war triggered. But I don't think we can assume that they're just going to sit still and let this be the state of affairs. They're going to be working very actively to try to defeat India's success in the future.
The possibility of Pakistan using a tactical nuclear weapon, has India with Operation Sindoor, the employment of air power, the employment of longer range weapons, drones, the BrahMos supersonic cruise missiles, including the S-400 system and defensive air defense system in an offensive role, does that reduce or remove the possibility of Pakistan using even a tactical nuclear strike? Because against a conventional weapon, and when Pakistan's state is not threatened, can they use a nuclear weapon? Or India has found the opportunity to punish them?
So let us be clear on the two doctrines on the opposite side. So on the Pakistan side, there is a deterrence, a full spectrum deterrence that they call from their nuclear doctrine point of view, where they speak of, tactical nuclear weapons, and they also speak of if the conventional wars cross a certain threshold, then also they can go in for a nuclear strike, right? And in our case, we have a minimum credible deterrence. There is a very clear no first use that we've enunciated. So this is where the doctrine stands. But in our doctrine, there is a case of massive retaliation and unacceptable damage in case there is a nuclear strike. So even if there are tactical nuclear weapons, the resolve is with us. There's a discussion going on in the military circles as to whether we should straight away go in for that massive retaliation or should it be a targeted sort of a retaliation. But the escalation management is very important. So starting off from what I said earlier, in terms of, hybrid wars and all the vectors that are associated with it, then you see the response. If the response is conventional, then you do conventional. And if the response is something else, then you do something else. So we are very clear about our escalation response, and that is where the controls and, the escalation management becomes very important.
General, you mentioned hybrid wars. And before I come to Professor Ladwig, I want you to talk about hybrid war. Pakistan's terror attack in Pahalgam was hybrid war, but India's response was conventional. And after that, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also made it very clear, India will not make any distinction between state, non-state actors. From the funerals of those Pakistani terrorists, where corps commanders were shouldering those coffins and attending the namaz-e-janaza, including the Gaibana namaz-e-janaza, it very clearly shows there's no difference. So that message goes across that there is opportunity for India to strike militarily even if terrorists are used. So there is no hybrid war anymore.
let me define hybrid war. It is a mix of contact and non-contact, a mix of kinetic and non-kinetic below the threshold of conventional operations, right? So Doklam, Galwan, all that comes in the context of hybrid war. Also cyber warfare, influence operation, narrative warfare, your trade wars, geographical warfare. In fact, the term used today is WOE, weaponization of everything. And it is not only military versus military, it is not states versus states. It is states and your allies versus the adversary and his allies. And the sub-threshold operations, as they are called, there is a wide spectrum in which they can be controlled. Creativity is being tested. I mean, you've seen what happened September 17th last year, the pager attacks. And cyber war, let me also tell you, is not restricted to just something on the IT side. What worries me more is the operational technology. What happened in the Iran, Natanz Stuxnet nuclear attack, what happened in the powerhouses, what happened in some of our energy sector, etc. So the spectrum of hybrid war is vast, and that is what is par for the course today, hybrid warfare.
Gaurav, can I just add one thing? I mean, what really concerns me thinking about war under a nuclear umbrella with this hybrid war is the effects that cyber and disinformation can have. We saw with Sindoor, the public information environment was saturated with, in some cases, misreporting, in other cases, purposeful distortions and things being put out here. So these pressures that this creates on policymakers, they have to make decisions in ever tighter and tighter windows because of the nature of war, while the information environment is ever more confused, right? The fog of war has been with us throughout human history, but it's ever more crowded and ever more complicated for decision makers today, and that's really something to worry about.
It indeed is. And if we talk about information warfare, was that Pakistani narrative, General, about downing Indian aircraft more widespread and prevalent in Indian context and globally, and not India's retaliation, which was far greater of imposition of costs on Pakistan? Imagine a country that loses 11 of its fighter air bases. What respect does that country have if its command and control structure is gone from Noor Khan, or if Sargodha is targeted, if Jacobabad is targeted, if Bolari Air Base is targeted, and yet the narrative is India ke kitne plane gaye? Where is India losing out on that information warfare?
So this is a issue which democracies often face, because here we have a system of information dissemination, where there's a Ministry of Information and Broadcasting involved, there's a Ministry of Defense involved, Ministry of Electronics and IT is involved, NSCS involved. And the adversary is a DG ISPR, a centralized control which spins out the narrative, which has all the different arms of the media under it, television, print, vernacular, press, embassies abroad, everything being centrally controlled, right? Similar thing is there in China. The cyberspace administration of China comes directly under Xi Jinping. That's where, the heart of the narratives take place. So a distributed system versus a centralized system is one of the areas that, makes us not so effective. But post Sindoor, now, measures are being taken that how do we carry out this aspect?
Because information warfare, Professor, is as integral to the missiles flying, because the information missiles that are flying impacts the mind. In your appreciation, what was the narrative? Planes lost on the Indian side, or the air bases, the 9 terror camps and the radar stations lost on the Pakistani side? Or did arms lobbies also have a role to play, because they wanted to send out that message that the Chinese weapons were doing better than the Indian, Soviet and Russian and French weapons?
Look, we know that nature abhors a vacuum, and I think, unfortunately, for reasons of operational security and other considerations, when the Pakistani side started putting out this narrative of 4, 5, 6, ever-increasing numbers of aircraft, the response was no comment. Not to address it, not to say anything, and without a countervailing narrative, that took hold. And at least what I saw sitting in London and seemed to global, people were running with this, and then, of course, compressed a much more complicated situation into questions of, as you said, French technology versus Chinese technology. And in fact, one of the reasons I ended up writing on this to try to point out India's successes and what it achieved was because this other narrative had just dominated. And I think in part, it's because it wasn't challenged at the start.
Should it have been challenged from the word go? There should be no information vacuum.
Yeah, I mean, there are still certain gray areas as far as Operation Sindoor 1 is concerned. For example, what was the damage to the Noor Khan Air Base is still being questioned. What was the American element that got damaged? Why are the Americans suddenly now wanting the Bagram airfield? Is there a connect with the Noor Khan damages? From the Chinese side, their air defense weakness has been exposed. The fact that, our missiles went through. The F-35 stealth aspects have also been exposed, the one that, came here and to Trivandrum. So a number of these issues have come out in Operation Sindoor, but the Indians, I think, should rest very satisfied with and the world has seen what we've done militarily, the precision with which we have struck. 300 kilometers away, going to the air vent of the Kinara Hills aspect, the BrahMos missile, I think is something that we can keep talking for generations to come.
You've studied Operation Sindoor at length. Your appreciation as somebody who studied it impartially, there's an Indian perspective, there's a Pakistani perspective. What's your perspective as an academic? Who won, if I may?
I'm a little uncomfortable with reducing military operations to winners and losers. It makes it a little like a video game, but I understand what you're asking. Look, India achieved its stated military objectives. It struck the targets it set out to struck while showing restraint on the first evening. When the conflict did escalate to an extent, India responded and showed an ability, as the general already pointed out, to penetrate air defenses, to strike a range of air bases, to suppress radars, and a willingness to do so, right? There were no political constraints holding India back. Its responses were proportional, but also effective. And I really think it broke new ground in demonstrating both the capability and the willingness to act.
True, absolutely. Now, given this situation, but why I played out what that radical Islamist Asim Munir said, he's elevated himself to Field Marshal. With his association now, he's already in the White House once again. Will he be emboldened to try something once again and perhaps raise the threshold? He knows what India can do to 11 air bases. Or would he think they've done this to 11 bases, next time they can do it to all 18 and more?
At his own peril. But you see, Pakistan again is going through its own dynamics at the moment. With his newfound relationship with US and with Saudi Arabia. With Chinese, actually the Chinese are very worried as to, what happens to their $60 billion investment in the CPEC with what is happening in Gwadar and Balochistan. So Pakistan is in quite a fix. I mean, they are trying to shift their terrorist bases across. But as I said, our policy of cumulative deterrent is very clear now. And the message has been sent loud and clear. You try anything next time, it's going to be much worse.
Is that also your appreciation, Professor? The messaging, because each time when you see, after Uri, there was a surgical strike, which was limited. After Pulwama, there was Balakot, which was only one terrorist camp. This time, 11 air bases across Pakistan, 9 terror camps, including hitting in Pakistan's Punjab province repeatedly, civil and military. So next time, would Pakistan factor that in, or a radical Islamist mindset will not?
So I think I'm glad you brought up the surgical strikes, because if we remember after they happened, what was the Pakistani response? It didn't happen. Didn't happen. Just denied that it occurred at all, and that sort of freed them from the need to respond to sort of save face or preserve their honor. I think because there is this countervailing narrative that they've put out and taken hold of aircraft shot down, they can completely look past all of the damage that you've just described and all of the successes that India has had, which means not that they don't understand it's real, but that they don't feel the need to respond to that to show that they haven't been deterred. I think they can actually, for the very good reasons the General talked about, the need for them to continue their IMF bailouts and so forth, focus on other issues and not necessarily acknowledge what India did without losing face, because they've put forth this counter-narrative that certainly has taken hold at home.
So next time, God forbid, if there is a terror attack, and this time they may use the Bangladesh route, they may use some other route so that there's no direct link, will India's options be constrained? And especially when you mention hybrid warfare, if they try to do something which cannot directly be pinned on Pakistan, the pain is on us.
So attribution is an issue in hybrid warfare. What you're saying is right. Even in cyber attacks, the attribution is an issue. But there are ways and means on, how to find out who's behind it. So it's like terrorism, and proxy actors. Proxy actors are in fact more dangerous because they just say that, it was not us and all that. So, but with the, background impact of who's actually behind it, it can be found out. It's not an issue. And definitely action will take place. Look, I mean, India's defense budget is about $80 billion. We are 8 times their, defense budget. Our army is about 5 times. I mean, they cannot think of doing something on the conventional side by themselves. So they would be also thinking of, some of the other aspects of hybrid warfare that you're talking of. And we have our escalation matrix in place. So nothing to worry about. You enjoy in Mumbai.
Post 26/11, if I'll just take another 30 seconds, post 26/11, when 166 people were massacred here in this city in 2008, India did not respond. And the thinking that time was, oh, Pakistan is a nuclear weapon state. You cannot respond to a nuclear weapon state. There'll be a nuclear war. Professor, I want you to elaborate on that nuclear escalation ladder. You see a conventional war escalating to a nuclear state? There are many levels, as Operation Sindoor showed. Within 88 hours, India was able to wrap it up.
So the nuclear escalation ladder is a concept to kind of think how we go from conventional war to nuclear war. If there is a war or a conflict, you can escalate horizontally. You can start the conflict that might, say, begin in Kashmir and spread to other theaters, go out to the Navy, horizontal escalation. Vertical escalation is increasing the intensity. You go from small arms to artillery to things like that. And that's the concern. We just don't know. Right? The nuclear escalation ladder is a theoretical construct that suggests how you could sort of stumble into the use of small tactical nuclear weapons and then full-scale escalation. What Sindoor showed, and again, I really want to emphasize, is breaking new ground in our understanding of the atomic era, is that there are additional rungs. There is more space than was previously thought. How many rungs there are, we just don't know.
Okay, so there are rungs, there are opportunities for India to punish Pakistan should the terror state continue. And as Rashtrakavi Ramdhari Singh Dinkar made it, he said in Shakti and Kshama, "Sach पूछो तो शर में ही बसती है दीप्ति विनय की, संधि वचन संपूज्य उसी का जिसमें शक्ति विजय की." Only those who are strong are respected. That's the message that comes out of Operation Sindoor. For joining me here on this special broadcast, many thanks.
Thank you.